Check, check. I think I got this. You guys hear me? Does this sound good? All right, I kind of, when I get nervous, I talk really loud, so get those earmuffs ready. All right. Well, I want to start off by saying thank you for coming. I know a lot of you have traveled quite a ways, and thank you to the NICE staff for inviting me. I hope they have no regrets when this is done. All right, and I want to say I apologize for this horrendous slide one here. It looks like a YouTube thumbnail, but it's in my DNA now, I guess. So let's start this thing off. So yeah, we're going to talk about the new space race that we find ourselves in. And it's a debatable thing. Some people say, well, we're not there yet. Well, I strongly disagree, and I'll explain why over the course of about 40 minutes. All right? So why are you here? Well, there are two real reasons why you're here. Number one, it's because you're human and you're confined to this planet. So welcome to Earth. All right? You're not a Martian, number one. And two, you want to be one. That's why you're here. Help me get off this planet, Kevin. Well, I can't help you. All right, you're stuck here with the rest of us for meow. All right, so a little bit about me. This is my favorite subject, talking about me, says my wife. All right, I'm a YouTuber. I run the space-eccentric YouTube channel, formerly known as Cloud Licker. I changed it for all the obvious reasons. It's been a journey. I started doing YouTube on and off since 2007, and you know, just as like a kind of a hobby thing. Then I started this channel in 2017. Again, as a hobby, and I knew I wanted to do space-related stuff like rockets and maybe some cloud licking, some skydiving, powered paragliding, but ultimately I got cornered into SpaceX news, SpaceX in the news. So I was like, well, I'm going to rebrand then so people don't think I'm weird. But it didn't really work out. People still think I'm weird. Some other people know that I like to play with Lego. Again, I'm weird. And this is my Lego Falcon Heavy that I built. I designed it and everything, and it was the first Lego rocket to actually go in front of the, SpaceX rocket to go in front of the Lego review board because it got 10,000 supporters, but then was rejected. I know, so don't go looking for it in the Lego store. It's not there. All right. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. And one more thing to know about me is that I love parachutes. Okay. Yeah, I hear people know, yeah, Kevin, we know, move on, okay? And I know some of you are saying, oh, that picture in the right there, that's the wing, that's not a parachute. This is my presentation. For argument's sake, it's a parachute for the next 2 seconds. All right, I'm from Salina, Ohio, Northwest Ohio, and the only reason I bring that up is because it's right next to the town that Neil Armstrong was born in, Wapakoneta, Ohio. So the Midwest, you guys should be familiar with that a little bit. All right, in Wapak, they have this museum called the Armstrong Air and Space Museum. And in that museum, their corner piece is the Gemini 8 capsule that Neil Armstrong and Dave Scott almost lost their life in when a thruster got stuck and started spiraling out of control in orbit. They almost blacked out and remained permanently in orbit. But Neil Armstrong was a boss, and he managed to deorbit them and save their lives because it's Neil Armstrong. This is the house he grew up in. He got his pilot's license before he got his driver's license. Yeah. All right? That's the kind of boss that he was. So I grew up idolizing him. I thought he was the man, and he was the man. And my dad was a mail carrier in Wapak, and I think he delivered mail to this house. We're just going to say he did because it sounds cooler. All right? So growing up in the Midwest, oh, and fun fact for you, Ohio is one of the few states that has like a lot of astronauts come from it. I think they're ranked 3rd or 4th behind California, Texas, and New York. We might beat New York now. But those are really big states with heavy populations. Ohio, we're not that popular, all right? So I think percentage-wise, ratio-wise, we might have the most astronauts. I think we have 29 that came from Ohio right now. So yeah, I don't know. I have my own little personal theory of why that might be. If you've ever been to Ohio or the Midwest, where a lot of you are from here, we got a lot of corn, okay? A lot of corn, like an uncomfortable amount of corn. And it's fun to go in the corn and play in the corn until you find a spider, then you're like, oh, I hate corn, and you run away. But it's also fun to look at when kids are making crop circles and teasing everybody, oh, we got aliens. But after a while, corn gets boring, and you're like, I'm sick of looking at corn. What else am I going to stare at in the Midwest? Oh, stars. I want to get as far away from corn as possible. Let's go up there. That's why we have so many astronauts in Ohio. Fact. Write that down. Okay. So when I was growing up in Ohio, yeah, you'll see a lot of GIFs. I don't know if like my students' presentations really rubbed off on me when I was a teacher, but I love GIFs and memes. Oh, anyway, none of these are me, all right? I was very responsible with my rockets. But growing up, I love model rockets. Yeah, I love that bottom right one, the little doggy. Yeah, growing up, I love model rockets. I wanted to be everything under the sun from time to time, including an astronaut. So I built a lot of model rockets with my dad, and then I surpassed my dad in model rocket intelligence and started building really dangerous things. And he's like, have fun with that. I'm going to stay in the house where it's safe. But anyway, yeah, I never got hit by my own model rocket. Surprised. But even though there was a time that I wanted to be an astronaut, I was never really inspired. I was never inspired by the age of astronomy and space exploration that I grew up in, the age of the space shuttle, okay? And I never really knew why. I was just never turned on by the space shuttle. I was like, okay, it's a space shuttle. It's cool to watch it launch, but then I'm done, okay? And I could never figure out a good way to put it to other people that asked me. Until I think this movie came out when I was in high school, I'm not really sure. The Astronaut Farmer came out, and I was watching it one day. And this movie is about this guy, Billy Bob Thornton, who builds a traditional rocket in his barn, safe, okay? And his friend, the guy from Armageddon, Bruce Willis, right, he doesn't kill himself to save the world in this movie, but he's Billy Bob Thornton's friend, and he's like, Billy Bob, or whatever your name is, don't go on your own homemade rocket. Go on the space shuttle where it's safe. And I thought Billy Bob had the perfect response that just filled that gap in my own soul about why I didn't like the space shuttle. He said, I don't want to hitch a ride on the bus. I was like, boom, nailed it. I don't want to take a Greyhound bus to space or to Cleveland, okay? It's boring. I just found it boring. I mean, not to, delegitimize if that's a word, the space shuttle and the engineers that built it, all right? It was still a complex machine worthy of admiration. But I was never into it. So I grew up, and I was born in the 80s. In fact, I was born about a week and a half before Challenger blew up. And so I never thought the shuttle was all to write home about. But so why did NASA go to the shuttle to begin with? Because I know in my position, I met a lot of people that are like, you know what, Kevin, I never really cared for the shuttle either. And maybe that's not how you think, but I know there's at least one other person in this room that thinks that. So why did NASA go from the mighty Saturn V to the shuttle? And it was because of moving on to reusable rockets. And Elon Musk wasn't the first one to think, oh, reusable rockets, that's the way to go. No, they figured this out long ago, okay? So that's why they went to the space shuttle. But here's the thing. It can be easily argued that the shuttle was a failed program because it was meant for reusability, but an average mission costs about $1 billion to $1.5 billion. It's mighty expensive for a reusable spacecraft. And again, it was a complex machine, and that's why it was so expensive. Unless we forget it cost the lives of 14 astronauts, so not that reliable. So I wasn't motivated growing up by the shuttle program. Of course, I built Lego shuttles and whatever, and then I crashed them and then rebuilt them. But I was all about the Apollo days, all the good old days of the 60s that I know nothing about because I wasn't born in the 60s, but I knew how to research. All right, and everyone knows the Saturn V. Beautiful rocket, still the most powerful rocket to ever fly. How is that? I don't understand how that happens, 50 years ago. Yeah, Russia. So I just thought the 60s would have been so great if I could have been born when my dad was born. All right, 1950, in my teenagers when this was all going on. And sure, the 1960s wasn't all perfect. We had things like the Vietnam War going on, okay? We had civil rights. We had 2 assassinations, Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr. So it wasn't perfect, but at least there was this little beacon of light coming out of the Cape. And I stole Scott Manley's thunder, so I apologize, Scott. This middle gift is the only one that only explosion rocket that I have here, and that's what Scott's going to talk about. But this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about just awesome. Okay. This was the test of the launch escape system in the Apollo days. And the way it worked was there were 3 wires running down the body of the rocket, right? And if 2 of those wires were cut because of an explosion or whatever, a little gremlin crawling in between the fuel tanks and decide to snip them. It doesn't matter. That top toothpick-looking rocket would pull away the capsule and bring the astronauts to safety. So they were testing out this technology. Well, it just so happens that the engineers hooked up the roll gyros incorrectly, and the thing just spiraled out of control anyway, and it broke apart, even though it wasn't supposed to, but the thing worked. So they're like, is this a failed test or a good test? I don't know, but we're just moving on, okay? And then, of course, during the good old days, you had go-karts on the moon. Sign me up, bro, okay? And then you had the flying bedstead in the bottom right-hand corner there. 3 of the 4 crashed, Neil Armstrong being one of those crazy pilots, all right? So, I mean, it would have been so nice to watch all that go down. And look at this. This is a party. I don't see parties like this anymore. What happened? So we moved on from the good old days into the early 80s and the space shuttle. And on the left there, you have Bob Crippen and John Young. If you don't know who John Young is, you need to do some research. He was, you know how they say a man's man? He was an astronaut's astronaut, okay? Guy has like the record for most missions. He was known for keeping a low heartbeat, beats per minute with his heart rate, never spiked. I think I even heard he snuck a sandwich on board a mission once. I mean, guy was awesome. You should watch one of his interviews. He's just like, yeah, cool. And I was like, okay. Anyway, so you have the top right. This is just to kind of, throw a bone to the engineers of the space shuttle. You can see how complicated the space shuttle was. Those are the bay doors with all the wiring running through it. So it was an awesome engineering feat, no doubt. The bottom left, the material that they're pulling, those blocks they're pulling out of the oven, is the same material that they used to make the space shuttle heat shield tiles. And they are cooked to 2,200 degrees. And the guy just picks it up and he's like, hey, look, I'm holding on to a lava block, okay? So that's pretty awesome technology. And then, of course, you have someone driving the space shuttle down the road there. So what happened with the space shuttle? Well, they retired it in 2011, as you guys know. And probably not a bad thing considering that it was such an expensive rocket for being a reusable rocket. But the thing was, it was bad timing because we had nothing to take its place, right? So from 2011 to the present, we started buying tickets on Russian rockets, the Soyuz. And we were spending like $80 million a pop on them. Whew. All right, and that price is only going up, okay? And I don't know about you, but I get upset when I spend more than a couple $100s on Southwest with that legroom. Look what they got, right? You guys are getting ripped off, yo. But the Soyuz is reliable, got to give them that. Can't argue with that. But still, we're basically paying for the whole rocket with just one seat. So that's where we're at now. We're paying the Russians. How embarrassing. Oh, gross. All right. We went from winning we went from winning the first space race to this, to paying them. So let's talk about what we can look forward to, though. And to do that, we're going to talk about the past. Okay. Formed in 2002, SpaceX came to fruition, okay, with the idea to colonize Mars by lowering the cost of space exploration or space transportation. That was the whole reason. I love this picture so much. Elon with his maracas. Are those maracas? I don't know. I'm not a musician. So Elon Musk, he is the CEO. His right-hand woman, Gwen Shotwell. And then, of course, you have me. First Lego SpaceX rocket. Don't forget that. Okay. And then just 6 years later, after their inception, they build the Falcon 1 rocket. Its 4th flight, the 4th attempt, they make orbit. If they wouldn't have done that, SpaceX would be gone. They wouldn't have existed by now. And we'd still be looking at NASA as like the leader, or maybe the Russians. I don't know. All right. So good thing that worked. A couple years later, they launched their first Falcon 9 rocket. They call it Falcon 9 because it has 9 Merlin engines on the bottom. This is a later version of the Falcon 9. The earlier version was stubbier. I didn't think it looked as cool, so I didn't put that GIF on here. All right, and they also, NASA was their first customer. They started launching missions for NASA right away and other commercial providers. And they started taking Cargo Dragon to the International Space Station as a resupply mission. So that's how they got their funding. In fact, that's Cargo Dragon, the first one hanging from their ceiling in Hawthorne, California. And we're just going through a lot of SpaceX's first right now, okay? About 5 years later, history is made. They land their first booster on a landing pad. This is what reusability is meant to be, okay? Because the space shuttle, sure, it was reusable, but it was a complicated reuse, took a lot of refurbishing. This was a step in the right direction, a huge step. And what's funny is out of all the years that humanity has been alive, and all the years that we've had space exploration, it came down to December of 2015, and then a month prior, Blue Origin lands their suborbital rocket. Isn't that crazy? You had all this time, and it comes down to like a 1 month gap. All right, that was the moment where I realized we were in a new space race, okay? Yes, okay. I almost got everybody on my side here. All right, that's what sealed the deal for me. And we'll play this. This is a SpaceX video. Cool. So, yeah. All right. In that video, you might have noticed this guy in a white tee double pumping his fists, and he should be. His name's Lars Blackmore, and him and his engineering team were responsible for that first landing. That was their mission, and so he deserves our gratitude because that was a really good job. And I also love his name, Lars. There's only one other Lars that I know, and it's this guy. Anybody know this movie? Heavyweights? Oh, good movie. All right. Okay, and then a few months later, SpaceX does it again, but even more impressive. All right. In April 2016, they land their first booster on a drone ship in the middle of the ocean. What? That's crazy. Let me play this really quick. It's not as long. All right, so when this happened, I was actually at the gym back when I had a membership, and I was pumping iron, and I see it come up on the news, and I'm just like, what? And like everyone else is still working, I'm like, you guys not seeing this? Is no one else here a nerd? They're all jocks, all right, I don't care. All right, this is what did it for me. This is what got me from my mentality of, oh, I wish I was born in the 1960s or 50s so I could experience the 60s, to no, thank you, Mom and Dad. I'm glad I'm where I am, okay? This is awesome, all right? Neil Armstrong ain't got nothing on this, okay? All right, he kind of does, all right? Now, it's kind of hard to compare the sizes because there's nothing to compare it to out in the middle of the ocean. There's no megalodon or anything. So you have to look here at this, I think that's a 737 maybe, commercial airliner, next to the booster, and then you have the X-15 too. That's a beast. You're controlling this thing with just, a rocket engine, and then you're landing it on this little platform in the middle of the ocean that you can't even see from space, and you're doing it autonomously. I mean, no one has a joystick and mission control saying, oh, I'm a little to the left, George. No. It's all doing it by itself. This was cool too. I think this happened last year, 2018. This was over the Los Angeles skyline. It was because it was like right after sunset when the light was still reflecting off the atmosphere. So they caught the first stage separating from the second stage, and you can see the boost back burn there on the right-hand side. It was hilarious. Oh, I remember reading those headlines. UFOs, help! 911, help us. All right, you uneducated fools, all right? Don't you watch the news? Yeah, Yeah, still, we're going down that line of progression. Then in February of 2018, how many of you watched this live? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I have a reaction video to this. I never watched it. It's embarrassing. But Elon was like, you know what? We're going to strap 3 of these Falcon 9s together. We're going to launch my car into space. Great idea, right? Oh, man. So that's what they did. They launched Elon's Tesla Roadster into a sun-synchronous orbit that goes further out than Mars, right? And you know, it sounds pretty easy just strapping 3 Falcon 9s together, but really it was a lot harder than that. Yeah, that's why they kept delaying it, and we all got mad at them.
Made a great T-shirt.
Yes, great T-shirt. And again, yeah, this is another YouTube video by another channel, and they kind of put it in perspective how big this rocket is. All right, it's insane. Another big achievement for SpaceX is their Starlink constellation. They placed their first 60 Starlink satellites into orbit on May 23rd, okay, to help bring high-speed internet to people that don't got none, okay? And then they just launched their second 60 just last week, successfully. It's pretty cool. They ultimately want to get maybe up to 40,000, no big deal, right? Then on June 25th, a huge achievement that took over a year of, you know, practice, I guess you could say. SpaceX caught their first fairing half on a boat in the middle of the ocean. I can't imagine the conversation Elon was having in his head to make this happen. He's like, okay, let's see. Fairings cost $6 million. That's a lot of cheddar cheese. So let's catch one of those and recycle them. Well, okay, Elon, what do you want to do? Let's use a net. You want to put a net over the entire ocean? No. Let's put a net on a boat. Let's let the boat drive itself. And let's have the parachute come out of the fairing like that, and then we'll have the two communicate, and then it will just fall into the net. Sweet, let's do it. A year later, they actually did it. That's why I will not doubt SpaceX ever anymore, okay? They have earned my, my loyal support. That's crazy. I can't, like when I was a skydiver, it was hard for me to control a parachute. I can't imagine being outdone by this thing. It doesn't even have a brain. Okay, yes, August 27th. And this is all happening behind the scenes, by the way. It's not like SpaceX is like, okay, we're doing one program now, and then we're going to work on another program. No, of course, they have to do Starlink, Starship, you know, catching fairings all at the same time because they're so bored, okay? And this is Starhopper. On August 27th, Starhopper went to 150 meters and hovered and then came down, all right? And basically, it looks small like a little gas can, but this is the biggest gas can you've ever seen, okay? It's 20 meters tall, and this was the second successful flight that it did. The first one was to 20 meters, so it basically hopped over itself for the most part. And this is a prototype. Starhopper's a prototype for Starship. Remember, SpaceX's original mission was to colonize Mars, and to do that, you need a Mars rocket. Well, this is that first step. Okay? I just say that once. This is Starship, all right? Again, bootlegging SpaceX video. This is their Mars rocket, all right? It's supposed to be a lot bigger than even the Saturn V and a heck of a lot more powerful, up to 37 plus or more Raptor engines, their new rocket engines strapped to the bottom of that first stage, and then 7 more in the second stage, which is what they call Starship. Boosters called Super Heavy. Okay, and they're making great strides in that. This is from their last presentation that I was grateful enough to get invited to. It was awesome. And this second stage is reusable, just like the whole thing is 100% reusable. That's why it's cheaper than a Falcon 1 rocket, all right? But it's a beast. It has heat shield tiles on the bottom, kind of like the space shuttle, only these are ceramic, so you don't have to refurbish them as often. And they're already almost finished building the first prototype for this. This is what it looks like. And this is just number one. They're already building a second one simultaneously in Cocoa, Florida. This one's in Boca Chica, Texas. And they're going to be working on a few more here really soon. Some of them they might already be even working on. Oh, and yeah, this is me at the presentation. To prove that it's real, because I've had people, I hear the weirdest things. I hear the weirdest things in my position. People telling me, oh, the Earth is flat, we never went to the moon, and Starship doesn't exist. Well, I was there. If that was a cardboard cutout, it was impressive, okay? And that's the Falcon 1 right next to it on the right-hand side there. And what's cool about Starship, this first prototype, is that It's going to go up to 20 kilometers, and then it's going to drop out of the sky like a skydiver, okay? And it's going to use its 4 fins to kind of actuate and orient itself in free fall. Then at the last second, it's going to do a retro burn and land like a Falcon 9 booster does. And this test is supposed to happen by the end of this year, so pay attention. We'll see if that is actually the case, but it's going to happen. They're going to try it, and no matter what happens, it's going to be exciting to watch. Okay, so what is Starship supposed to achieve in the near future? People. They're building it to send, Elon says, 100 people to Mars at a time. They also want to take people to the moon and possibly the space station as well. And they want to turn Starship into a point-to-point, like commercial airline or space line kind of thing, so they can quickly take people around the world. They also want to use it for cargo or satellite as a satellite provider, or a satellite vehicle, or cargo to moon bases or Mars bases, what have you. They'll also use it as a fuel tanker, so they can refuel other starships in orbit. And then lastly, if they can get around to it, they'll use it to collect space junk. All right. Let's talk about the near future. What's going on right now that's going to be happening here in the next couple months? Crew Dragon, just like Cargo Dragon goes to the International Space Station, Crew Dragon is meant to take the place of these Soyuz rockets we're paying the Russians to take American astronauts to the space station. Okay? Parachutes. The Demo 1 flight happened, what's that say? I can't remember. March, that's right, March of 2019. Okay, and it was successful. They got to the space station and they brought it back down. That's the one you're looking at right now. Dropped it in the ocean, then they static fired it just for kicks. Well, a little more than just for kicks, but then it suffered an anomaly. Another word for saying it exploded and made a really sweet show. Okay? And ever since then, they've been investigating it, but they got it figured out. And they just did that static fire again last week, and it was a success, so they're making strides. They're moving on to the in-flight abort test, and they're still saying that they're hoping that will be done this year before the Demo 2 flight in early 2020, which will take the first American astronauts on commercial crew spaceships to the space station. Does that make sense? Capiche? All right, and this is another SpaceX video I'll show you of Crew Dragon. I love that word, nominally. They say it so much better than everybody else, though. Okay, so the 1960s. It was the USA versus the Soviet Union. Pretty cut and dry race there, right? It was like a 100-meter dash or a marathon between 2 people. But what do we got today? Today we got a tire track meet, all right? From every school in the country, basically. All right, this isn't even all the companies and agencies. I couldn't fit them all on there, and I got sick of looking for or Googling transparent logos of space companies. All right, so we're not going to go through all these. We'll just go through what I believe are the main American players. So this is where we're at now. This is a new space race, people. All right, NASA. They're like the center of what's happening right now. Like it or not, NASA's at the center here. Okay. And what's going on with NASA right now? Well, they have their Artemis project. They want to go back to the moon and then to Mars using commercial crew, providers. Okay. They're building the Orion capsule, or I should say Lockheed Martin's building their Orion capsule for them, all right, to put it on top of a Boeing-made SLS rocket. You can argue that NASA might be making the same mistakes they did during previous eras because SLS isn't reusable, all right? And this thing costs about $2 billion per launch. Whew. Yeah. Compare that to a Falcon Heavy that you saw, $90 million. $2 billion, $90 million. You can see why some people aren't big fans. But whatever, rockets are cool. And the way the Artemis is supposed to work is they're going to put another space station, but they're going to put it in space, but they're going to put it around the moon, in orbit around the moon. They'll take their Orion capsule on the SLS up to the moon, dock it with the Lunar Gateway space station, then the crew will transfer over to a lunar lander vehicle, land it, bring it back, go back to the Orion capsule, and come back to Earth. That's the way it's supposed to work. And there you have Jim Bridenstine showing off his sumo suit. All right. This is their EVA suit. They also have a flight suit that they just made for this Artemis project. And I like Jim Bridenstine. I think he's a go-getter. He's the administrator for NASA. He's the first one that that's actually caught my attention because he's very vocal. He's very passionate, and I respect that. Okay, another key player in this current space race is Boeing. Obviously, they're the ones building SLS, but they're also building Starliner, like the competition to SpaceX Crew Dragon. Okay, it's also meant to take people to the International Space Station. Okay, so we can stop paying the Russians. And they just completed last week a pad abort test where 2 of the 3 parachutes worked successfully, but overall the mission was a success. Apparently for the pilot chute that's supposed to drag the main chute out, a pin wasn't put in all the way, so when the pilot chute deployed, it just said, peace out, and it just didn't pull anything out with it. All right, slight little oversight there, but whatever. Blue Origin, another big player going on right now in the space race. Blue Origin has created New Shepard. It's a suborbital vehicle that, like I was saying before, it actually landed propulsively before a month before SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket. But its purpose is to take people, like tourists, into a suborbital flight, reaching just the tip of space and back, okay? For a small fee, probably a few $100,000. I don't know how much it's going to cost. Maybe tens of thousands. All right, if it's free, I'll go on it. They're also currently designing and starting to build New Glenn, which is their orbital vehicle. Okay, that will take satellites to orbit and beyond, and they're even saying they still want to take passengers up using the rocket one day, and it lands like a Falcon 9 rocket does on a drone ship. Okay, only this time the drone ship's moving, so it's more steady. So they're going to land on a moving target. That'd be cool to watch. Blue Origin has recently announced that they teamed up with other private space companies to build NASA's lunar lander for their Artemis project, so that's going to be underway here real soon. And then this summer, Jeff Bezos, who is the CEO and he also is the CEO of Amazon, he came out and said that he too wants to start an internet satellite constellation project. And of course, Elon Musk wasn't going to let this go, so he tweeted, "Hey, copycat." Meow. All right. Then we have Virgin Galactic and Virgin Orbit, all right? Richard Branson's companies. Virgin Galactic is also just like Blue Origin, trying to get private passengers up into space. Well, little asterisk, space according to American standards, which is a little bit lower than the international standards of space, that little Kármán line we got going on there. But they've already taken a private passenger, one of their own employees, up into the edge of space using their Spaceship 2 vehicle, which is a reusable like space plane. And what it does is it's kind of like an X-15. It drops below another mothership, launches its burners, lights the fires, and goes up, which is pretty neat. And then they're using that same method for their Launcher 1 with Virgin Orbit. They're going to drop like a missile from the bottom of a commercial airliner, basically. And they're going to launch little CubeSats or microsats. They want to be the first ones to launch those satellites to Mars, to orbit around Mars. But they have yet to actually light the fires for their Launcher 1 rocket. They've just done these drop tests. And then the last little private company we're going to talk about is Rocket Lab, owned by American and New Zealand companies. It's based out of New Zealand. By far has the most beautiful launch site. All right, it's pretty to look at. I just like tune in on YouTube just to stare at it before it launches because it's got a sweet panoramic. But what's cool? Rocket Lab, the Electron rocket, launches ride shares, okay? So a bunch of private satellite providers are like too cheap to buy their own rocket, okay? Hey, let's share the cost. Let's share the cost with different satellite makers, and we'll just share the cost of the rocket. We'll put a bunch of different smaller sats on the rocket, and we'll go to space. So that's what Rocket Lab does. But this is a market worth billions of dollars, and it's really starting to take off. There are a lot of players that want to get in this game. So again, the new space race isn't like cut and dry, let's just get to the moon versus this person. It's everybody wants to get to the moon, to Mars, to orbit. They want to conquer the rideshare program. It's a lot of different mini games going on. And what's cool about the Electron rocket is that they call it the Electron rocket because it uses batteries, like you find in your car, I guess, to charge the turbo pumps that inject fuel into the engine. And then batteries are heavy, so what do? At the bottom there, you can see they hot swap them or just ditch them off the second stage when they get into space. Pretty cool. So this photo was taken during the Apollo 8 mission by Bill Anders. It's the first picture they ever took of the Earth from the moon. And it's called Earthrise, and Bill Anders said that they really went to the moon to discover the Earth. And I just want to close by saying, everyone has their own reasons for being motivated about what's going on in space. Everyone's in this room for a reason. Elon Musk said he has 2 reasons why he's into his companies and SpaceX and going to space. One is because he doesn't want humanity to put all their eggs in one basket. If something happens to the Earth, he wants people to be on other planets so we aren't all decimated and eliminated. Okay, I get that. But he also said his reason for being so motivated to do space stuff is because he wants to be excited about the future. He wants to wake up and be like, oh, this is cool. And that's where I land. All right, I'm so inspired by this just because I think exploring the stars it's really cool. I don't think words are ever going to adequately describe why I'm so into it. But you can ask yourself why you are. And hopefully it's because you're excited and not because you're afraid. And there is a lot of pretty messed up things going on right now on our dark planet. But we're all in it together. And I would just want to close by saying no matter how dark it might get, for me personally, I always found that just, taking a step back and for me opening up the Bible just gives me hope for the future. So anyway, thank you guys so much for coming and have a nice trip home.